Okay, I call to order the meeting of Mayor and Council. I want to welcome everybody here and say Merry Christmas to start off our meeting. And if you'll rise for the invocation by Councilman Holland.
Let us pray, bow our heads. Father God, we stand before you on this night that you had made. We pray and ask for your leadership and your guidance. We pray, Father God, for blessing everybody that's here tonight that's attending this meeting. And as we pray, Father God, you bless us with wisdom, knowledge, and common sense, help us to decide right from wrong. And now, Father God, that you lead us to walk by faith and not by sight. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Okay, just to let council know, we are going to pull the executive session off the agenda tonight. Are there any other changes to this agenda?
Yes, sir, Mayor. We do not need to address new business item number 5. We can delete that from the agenda as well.
Okay, very good. You don't need a motion on that, correct?
Just accept the agenda with changes. A motion to accept this.
So I need a motion to accept the agenda with changes.
Councilman McCoy, so moved.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Is there a second?
Councilman Holland, I second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. All right, you've all received the minutes from our last meeting on November 23rd. If there are no questions or comments in regards to those minutes, I'll accept the motion to receive them.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to receive the minutes from Councilman Holland. Is there a second?
Councilman McCoy, I'll second.
Okay, second on that. We all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. We have a full room here tonight, and I'm guessing they're not here to hear the annual audit. So with your permission, we're going to go ahead and bring up old business number 1 in regards to the fetal remains, and I'm going to ask our city solicitor to come up to the mic. Just as a reminder to council, this was in regards to how fetal remains are treated, and this ordinance would promote that they would be handled in a dignified manner. This is not something new. This is something that's already gone through the court system up to the Supreme Court. Many other states are following that. From our last meeting, there were some questions concerning cost, what the cost would be a burden on someone who went through something like this, and through our investigation, through our local funeral homes, there is no cost to have fetal remains cremated, so there is no cost there. There was also concern about litigation and what impact that would have on our citizens at the city of Seaford, and a person has stepped up and said they would financially support us on that, so there would be no cost to the taxpayers if this was to create some sort of litigation after the fact. So the rest I'm going to leave up to our city solicitor, who has worked hard on this, to walk us through. We did receive a letter late today from the Attorney General, so he'll walk through that as well and also explain where we are and why we have a path to do this.
Thank you very much, Your Honor, and I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, members of council, to address you again tonight with respect to this ordinance. I think to address where we are tonight, some procedural history with respect to this ordinance is probably in order. As Mr. Mayor, council members will remember, the first time I appeared before this body with respect to this ordinance was September 28th. And at that time, I explained to council that one of the things we have done over the course of the years that I've been the solicitor here has been to try to canvass the legal landscape to see what trends there have been for local governments, state governments. And one of the trends over the last few years has been to address the dignified disposal of fetal remains. There are presently, I believe, 13 states that have fetal remains or dignified fetal remains ordinances. The United States Supreme Court had addressed the issue and upheld the constitutionality of these fetal remains, dignified fetal remains laws. So if you will recall, on September 28th, what I really addressed was, number one, what the terms of the ordinance were going to be, what the idea was to dispose of fetal remains by one of two methods, either cremation or burial, and then also to emphasize that this type of ordinance has been upheld by the Supreme Court. One of the other things we talked about on September 28th was that there was nothing new or creative on our side about the language in this ordinance. Much of the language was taken from prior laws that had been passed and upheld. So frankly, on September 28th, I didn't anticipate the level of involvement and discussion about this. It seemed very straightforward. It was something other governments had done and had passed constitutional muster. And so that was the first reading. We scheduled it for a second reading on October 12th. And nothing of substance happened in the following 13 days after the first reading. Pretty much the day of the second reading on October 12th, we got a letter from the ACLU, but more consequently, we got a letter from the Attorney General's office, the Deputy Attorney General. And what that letter did was two things. Number one, it asked us to postpone the vote until the state had an opportunity to weigh in more substantively. And it also asked me to provide the legal authority under which the city of Seaford had authority to enact this dignified fetal remains ordinance. So as council will remember, unanimously, there was a vote to postpone a vote on the ordinance until these things could be addressed in a more fulsome manner. About 2 days later, on October 14th, I provided the state with what was requested. I sent an email to the Deputy Attorney General who had originally requested postponement, and I outlined at that time the legal authority that the city of Seaford has to enact an ordinance like this. I won't bore you with the full email, but I laid out the authority under Seaford's Home Rule Charter. I emphasized that the city does have the authority to enact an ordinance like this, but I also mentioned that the city was interested in working with the state on this and would be interested in hearing from the state concerning its thoughts. My email ended with the comment that I'm hopeful we can address any concerns the state may have. As you know from Seaford's agreement to abide by the state's request to table the vote on this ordinance, Seaford is hopeful to engage in a process through which the state will support the ordinance. Again, that was October 14th. We had heard nothing from the state after that. There was no response other than thanking me for my email. And since that time, approximately 2 months have passed without having heard anything, since the state had not weighed in. But we knew the state had concerns. We took the opportunity to canvass this idea with other attorneys who had experience in this area and get some ideas about how we might improve the ordinance with some language that would explain, number one, why the city of Seaford has the authority to do this, and number two, any concerns that the state may have, we might address proactively in language in the ordinance, so that if the state did have any concerns, we would have been proactive and already addressed that. And so you have a red-line version of some of the changes we made, but I'll just briefly mention them right now. One of the more important things we did with the ordinance since October 12th was add a more substantive findings section. And that findings section was designed to do a few things. Number one, it was designed to ensure and emphasize that we know that a woman has a right to abortion nationally and in the state of Delaware. So we made it very clear. We cited Roe v. Wade and said we understand that a woman has a right to abortion, and this ordinance is not intended to impair that at all. And then number two, we identified those state of Delaware code provisions which allow us to enact the type of ordinance that we're talking about. And then the third part of the findings was a recognition that if the state weighs in on this issue, and the state, we can't enact anything that's different from what the state says. That if the state has already, for instance, enacted a fetal ordinance law, we can't enact something that's different from what the state has already enacted. And we recognized all of that in the findings. So we kind of laid out the legal landscape so that if the state had any concerns, they could see where our thinking was on the ordinance. And then after the findings, one of the things we did was mention that the ordinance would apply to miscarriages as well as abortions. We wanted to make sure that fetal remains from abortions weren't treated differently from fetal remains from miscarriages. We wanted to make sure from a constitutional perspective, fetal remains from abortions received equal protection under the law as fetal remains from miscarriages. We also noted that there are notification provisions in the Delaware Code, state law, for unemancipated minors who are interested in getting abortions. So we added language to address the state code there. And then finally, we just made clear, a little more clearly, that we understood that this dignity ordinance was authorized by state law. So we included all of that language, and then about 6 hours ago, maybe 5, 6 hours ago, we got a letter from the Deputy Attorney General's office. I forwarded that letter to you all. Hopefully you have seen it. Hopefully you have read it. And what that letter does is outline some objections that the state has to the dignity ordinance that we have drafted. I haven't had the opportunity to respond in writing to the state yet. It's a letter brief of about 5 pages, but I didn't want those arguments and representations in the letter to remain of record before this body without the opportunity for me to offer my comments for what they're worth for your consideration. There's really 4 elements that the state has identified that it has an issue with respect to this ordinance. And just from a legal perspective, taking a step back, the law on this issue is clear when it comes to the relationship between a municipality and a state. And that is, if a state has weighed in on an issue, a municipality can enact ordinances that are covered by that state law, but it can't be inconsistent with that state law. So any objection by the state to this proposed ordinance would have to do 2 things. It would, number 1, have to identify a state law that covers this area, and then number 2, identify an area of the ordinance that contradicts that state law. And so I think the state understands the standard that it needed to meet in this letter, but I want to offer my thoughts on whether it did actually meet that standard. The first concern that the state raised was that the authority to regulate the disposal of medical waste is vested in DENRIC. And there is a quote from the state's letter that says, all pathological waste must be incinerated, cremated, or interred in accordance with 24 Delaware Code 31. Obviously, our dignity ordinance provides for the disposal by cremation or burial. So it's squarely within that definition. So I would agree with the state that there is a Delaware Code provision that addresses this area, so the first prong of the standard has been met, but I don't believe there's any consistency with what this ordinance provides and what the state law provides in this instance. The second concern that the state raised was that the Division of Public Health regulates the disposal of human remains, and it provides the definition of a dead body. In the state's letter, it makes pretty clear that the definition of a dead body does not include what the state refers to as an aborted fetus. Under state law, and I don't want to get the language wrong, abortions in Delaware are permitted up until viability of the fetus, commonly from 20 to 23 weeks. And so this provision, a dead body is defined as a lifeless human body. The regulations define a dead body as any human dead body, including any products of human conception, expelled weighing 350 grams or more, or after 20 weeks of gestation. So under this definition, dead body is typically those remains after the period of abortion has passed. So again, there's the fetal remains that are addressed in this ordinance are not a dead body as defined by the Division of Public Health. So again, it's a state law that addresses this area, but we are not inconsistent with that provision. The third area that the state identified as a concern is that medical facilities are regulated by the Department of Health and Social Services, the Division of Healthcare Quality. The concern there is that we have a provision in the dignity ordinance that limits facilities from providing beds or other accommodations for the stay of a patient which exceeds 12 hours in duration. The state is silent on that. There is no state law that addresses that particular provision. The state's concern, as mentioned in the letter, is that our ordinance imposes an additional requirement on a hospital facility. It doesn't say anything about a requirement that is inconsistent with what the state already provides. We're permitted to add additional requirements so long as they're not inconsistent with what the state does. So that concern, in my view, does not upset the validity of the dignity ordinance. And then the last concern about inconsistency raised by the state has to do with the requirement that we added in the new language that right now parental notification is required for unemancipated minors. All we really did was the notification that's required for an abortion by an unemancipated minor is now also required for the disposal. So as a matter of fact, in the new language, we even quoted from the state statute. We relied upon the state statute. So again, it's an additional requirement, but it's not inconsistent with the state statute. Those are all the concerns that the state raised with respect to any conflict with state law. The letter also mentioned that the state's belief that this would be unconstitutional. That has, in our view, the constitutionality of an ordinance like this has been upheld by the Supreme Court. The argument that the state has raised is that this ordinance would create an undue burden on women seeking abortions, and that particular argument, whether or not an ordinance like this creates an undue burden on a woman seeking an abortion, has not specifically been addressed by the Supreme Court. That part is true. That has not been resolved, but it hasn't been resolved either way. So we believe that the Supreme Court precedent would hold and support this ordinance. So I'm not terribly concerned about the constitutionality argument. So those would be my responses to the state's letter, other than a sort of editorial comment. I want to emphasize that I don't have a dog in this race. I'm not an elected official, so nobody cares what I think about whether this is a good idea or not. And I'm not here before the council to suggest whether this is a good idea or not. So my editorial would just be that when somebody asks me what I think of the state's letter, I also look at the CCs on the letter, and I see that the entities copied with the state's letter were Planned Parenthood of Delaware, the ACLU of Delaware, and the Southern Delaware Alliance for Racial Justice. So if I had to offer an editorial, my view of it when I saw this letter was that it seemed to be an ideological position taken but couched in legal terms to challenge the ordinance. So those are my thoughts. I know I've had the floor for a little while. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I just wanted to go through the procedural history to let you know where we are and comment on the letter we got today.
Okay, questions from council? Councilman King?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Griffith, I'm not a lawyer, so bear with me as I go through. I've received some questions, and so I'm going to ask some things, and so just bear with me.
Sure.
All right, reading the letter that the attorney's office sent out, I guess some of my question is around the legality. So we're referencing Indiana, correct? So we're saying, hey, we copied and we mimicked a lot of that ordinance into what we've created here for the city of Seaford.
Generally, I would agree with that.
Okay. So with that being said, if I'm reading this correctly, the state of Delaware currently has in law a ordinance for how fetal remains is handled.
So I'm not sure I would agree with that. It has as the state mentioned in its letter, what it has is a ordinance that applies to medical waste and how pathological waste, which includes fetal remains. Under the current state of Delaware law, fetal remains are considered pathological waste. And that's one of the reasons why some of these laws have been passed, because these government bodies don't want fetal remains to be referred to as waste, pathological waste. It's a more dignified way to approach it. In Delaware, pathological waste must be disposed of by incineration, cremation, or interment. So the short answer to your question is yes, the state has a provision that provides for the disposal of pathological waste, which includes fetal remains.
Okay, so if I understood it correctly, in Indiana, the city that came up with the creation of this ordinance, the state of Indiana did not have a disposal ordinance or law in place as a state.
I think that was the argument that was made, right?
Right. So my point being is that there was nothing in place, and Indiana come out, the city of Indiana came out creating an ordinance. The state couldn't come back at them saying, hey, look, we already have this in law. There was nothing that existed, so when they fought that decision, in the Supreme Court, it was upheld because the state of Indiana had nothing on the books.
So I think you might have misspoken. You mentioned the
Okay.
city of Indiana.
Okay, no, I'm talking about the state of Indiana.
Right. So there
So
was
you-
no,
okay.
I agree with you that there was no conflict between a city and a state
Okay.
in that case. Because a state, and frankly here too, if Delaware wanted to, and if it had a member of the General Assembly and a majority of the General Assembly stand up and say, we are going to create a law, and that law is going to say, here's how you dispose of fetal remains. Well, then we can't touch that. We, one way or the other, if it's in favor or against, we can only do this if the state is silent on it.
Okay, so I guess for me, I think this is my opinion, is the state of Indiana, the matter not being overturned in the Supreme Court may have caused the belief that a similar ordinance in Delaware would withstand a legal challenge.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that if the state enacted a law like Indiana did, it would withstand a legal challenge.
Sure.
I
So,
would
however,
agree.
as the Delaware Attorney General pointed out, the state of Indiana did not have an existing statute that included fetal remains. Delaware does have a state statute regarding fetal remains. Therefore, no town or city ordinance can supersede a state statute. As Delaware already has a statute addressing fetal remains, this ordinance would not be legal and would not withstand legal challenge.
So I would say two things. Number one, the state of Indiana, when it was enacting its law, wasn't addressing anything. It started from scratch and decided to treat fetal remains the way this ordinance does. And again, I would also agree that we could only do this because the state of Delaware doesn't. I mean, we would be saving ourselves a lot of time if the state of Delaware had enacted a law. And that law would be analyzed under the same standards as the Indiana law. The state would have an advantage there, but we can only enact this when.
Sure. Well, don't you think that should be done more at a legislative hall, having those conversations about changing the law that's currently existing, instead of a city coming out trying to create an ordinance? And the reason I'm asking that, right, is that there's going to be, I mean, it's not a threat, there's going to be litigation. If this passes tonight, the state is pretty firm in saying, hey, there's going to be legal action. And so when you look at the legal action, you look at the cost, and I hear the mayor say, hey, someone stepped up, and I appreciate that. But we've already got about $10,000 tied up into what we've done so far. And then if you go to the Delaware courts, and then you go to the Supreme Court, and right now nothing's going to the Supreme Court because they're going to weigh in on Roe versus Wade. So everything we're talking about now, 6 months from now, could completely change at a federal level. Could.
Anything could change
Right.
any time. And with respect to your comment about the state could enact a law that would address.
I'm talking about elected officials coming in,
Correct.
right, more so
Correct.
than at a city level.
Well,
Council.
members of the General Assembly are certainly entitled to enact a law that specifically addresses this, one way or the other.
Right.
It could say you're not allowed, it could adopt every provision we have in this ordinance. It could go the exact opposite way and say you are not permitted to regulate. It could say municipalities are not permitted to regulate the disposal of fetal remains.
Sure.
And if they did that, game over.
Sure. And I guess my point being, as you alluded to earlier, working with and working through, right, instead of working against. I mean, a timeline of a month and a half, 2 months for the state, I mean, do you find that unreasonable?
Well, I found the timing coincidental because our last meeting was October 12th. We got a letter that day. This meeting, December 14th, we got a letter 5 hours ago.
Sure.
I don't know that the timing of a couple months is unreasonable. It's curious when it comes a few hours before the meeting.
Sure. Because, I mean, I reached out to their office today to get clarity, right? So I want to be informed and have as much information present before I make a decision.
I
I
appreciate
called
that.
the office and they picked the phone up and every question I had, they answered. And the thing that concerns me is the litigation, the costs associated with that. And at the end of the day, you know, if Delaware has something currently written around this, to me, that's where we need to change that instead of a city going up against the state, has unlimited resources and unlimited money, and we're just a small city with a certain amount of money.
I can appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councilman Henderson?
Mr. Griffith, do you feel such that it is that 5 hours to review a 5-page document from the Department of Justice is enough time for you to make an informed decision?
I will represent, Mr. Councilman, that although it's an attorney-client privilege communication I had with the mayor today, what I said was, you usually get about 30 days in court if you get one of these documents to respond. So I had a 2-hour drive here, so that was that consumed some of the time. I will say it was a lot to digest.
As a follow-up,
Yes, sir.
would it be beneficial to you to have more time to review this letter?
I doubt my positions would change. I did the best I could to read it very carefully and to compare it to the ordinance. I don't know that I could commit to having a different position or greater support for my position than I do right now. I think, in all candor, I think it's a debatable issue.
So I just wanted to offer you every opportunity to do your best work.
I appreciate that. And I could probably, I'm not sure that these positions aren't hardened. I would love to flatter myself into thinking I could change the state's mind if I just had a little more time. I'm relatively confident that whatever I put together in response to this will, again, I tend to believe subjectively and perhaps cynically that this is an ideological debate as opposed to a legal one.
Well, I would tend to agree, and I think it's borderline unprofessional of the Department of Justice to give 5 hours' notice of a weighty matter such as this. Nonetheless, the Department of Justice deserves the respect as the top law enforcement agency in the state. But I would like it on record that I feel that it's unprofessional and disrespectful of this body and to you as a professional, as a barred Delaware attorney, that they would behave in this manner.
I appreciate those comments, Councilman.
Any other questions from council? Councilman Santos?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. Wouldn't you say that this ordinance would also be an ideology that we're trying to pass into a law? We have, as I've mentioned before at the last meeting, everybody here believes that life begins at different points based off of their upbringing, based off of their religious beliefs. And here we are, drawing a line, and people are going to land wherever they, how have you mentioned it? People are going to fall wherever they land on, or something like that. It's based off of their religious beliefs. The emails that I received in favor mostly were, they cited the Bible. Their reason was more in favor based off of the people's religion. The people that were against it, they were talking about how we were a body of man making decisions for women. That this was that we were adding undue burden to them. The stuff that we have here, right? But the people, whenever I was looking at these responses or input from the community, I had to set aside the ones that were based off of religion, because I never signed up to be a political weapon for a certain religion, no matter how many people are in favor of this or against it. I believe that we have a First Amendment right that we must protect. Instead of protecting it, I think we are chipping away at it tonight. Government should not interfere in people's religious views, either in public or in private. And I believe that this is happening at this medical facility. We are saying this is the line. This is where the city of Seaford stands, and we're enforcing it onto our community. And
I respect those.
and the First Amendment was made to protect the minorities, as far as whether the minority groups, as far as religions, or whether they believed in certain, they needed that protection. There's been times where certain views were a bad thing at a certain point, and later on in the future, we see those points as being generally good. For example, the abolitionists during the slavery movement. These were generally ideas that we were like, oh well, many people thought that they were bad, and the views changed. Not saying that this, I really don't know if this view on fetal remains will change anytime soon, but we have to respect other religions and minorities.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Councilman McCoy.
Can we go back to the Supreme Court ruling just for a second?
Sure.
Of your knowledge of that case, why do you believe it was upheld at the Supreme Court level?
Sure. So there were two main conclusions that the court made. Number one was the state or the government does have a legitimate interest in regulating the disposal of fetal remains. That was one of the primary issues, is should the state even get involved in this? That if abortion is legal, should the state even get involved in whether or not the government can regulate the disposal of fetal remains? And the court said yes, the state does have a legitimate interest in that issue. And then the second question was, is this, I'm not sure if it was rationally related or a legitimate exercise of that interest? Does that particular language, is that a legitimate exercise of the state's interest in regulating that issue? And it said yes. I will comment further, but that there is an argument that was raised in the state's submission that was not addressed in the Box case in Indiana by the United States Supreme Court. So that's an open issue, and that is whether or not a law like this represents, I think the language is a significant obstruction, or I don't want to get the language wrong. So it's not, sometimes it's called an undue burden, but it is also, I guess it is undue burden. Oh, substantial obstacle. Okay. Whether it's an undue burden or whether a law like this creates a substantial obstacle to a woman seeking an abortion, that issue was not addressed. So that's one of the bases of the state's argument, is that, hey, you can't rely on that Supreme Court decision on that issue. You can rely on the Supreme Court decision for those other two issues, but whether or not this creates an undue burden for a pregnant woman seeking an abortion, or whether or not it creates a substantial obstacle, that issue hasn't been decided yet, and I would agree with that.
If I can make one comment, I do disagree with you in regards to your terminology addressing the Attorney General. You say it's curious. I describe it as strategic. They waited to the day, purposefully. They're disrespecting us and you and the people that are here, and they're targeting us. So I don't believe it's curious. I believe it's very strategic on their end.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments from City Council? Councilman Santos.
Mr. City Solicitor, with my past remarks, what would your thoughts be on this, as far as if it is constitutional or not constitutional? Here we have a letter saying that it's unconstitutional, but didn't address the points that I was bringing. And what do you say to that?
Sure, Councilman. If I believed that this ordinance would be struck down as unconstitutional, I feel like I would be wasting council's time, the mayor's time, my own time in helping to draft it. So I certainly believe that this ordinance would withstand scrutiny and constitutional challenges.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Councilman
I
King.
want to kind of piggyback off what Councilman McCoy said. Was there any communication to the state that this would be on tonight's agenda? I mean, with you going back and forth and having conversation, did you keep them in the loop, saying, hey, look, we hadn't gotten the statement, we've gotten no communication. Hey, in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, we're gonna revisit this. Did you send any communication to the state saying, hey, look, this topic of conversation is going to be back on the table by the state?
It's a great question. I'm happy to address it. So the communications with the state, I believe, started Tuesday, October 12th, which was the night of the second reading. I got an email from the state at 2:30 p.m., but before that meeting, saying, my apologies for not getting this to you this morning as I intended. Please see the attached letter to your clients. We are reviewing the ordinance's legality, but have real concerns about it. The next communication was the letter asked for the legal authority. I responded on, okay. I asked him if he had time for a quick call at 3:30 that day. And then he said the day after so it was an October 12th meeting of council for the second reading that was postponed. And then he sent me an email the next day at 5:29 p.m. and said, thank you for your prompt consideration and transmitting this to your client. I anticipate us sending a more detailed letter in the next week or so once our research is complete. So that was October 13th, and based on that representation, I anticipated something more detailed by October 20th. The next day, I sent him my more detailed explanation of why I thought we had the authority to do this, and requested the opportunity to address any concerns the state may have. Did not get that letter from the state the week. Didn't hear anything until this afternoon.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councilman McCoy.
I apologize, I misrepresented something. When I said didn't hear anything from the state till this afternoon, that's not actually correct. I got an email from the state on Friday that said they had concerns about the ordinance. It was a bullet point of concerns, and they said, well, they'll get me a more detailed letter at the latest Monday, which would have been yesterday. Did not get that, and then got it at 2 o'clock today. So I did hear from them on Friday. I didn't.
Councilman McCoy.
First reading, we get this letter. We decide it's best to postpone.
That was actually the second reading.
Excuse me, second reading. I believe that was the right decision. At that time, we needed to work through the state, get more information. I believe it was a blessing for us because we were able to deliberate more, come to more information. Today, we get another letter 5 hours ago. My concern is that I can sense some reluctance at this body to move forward, given that we just got another letter, and that it puts you in a position to act on this letter hastily. I kind of want to double back on what Vice Mayor Henderson was suggesting. If you were provided more time to look over this letter, you still believe your positions would remain the same, that nothing would change? I guess what I'm getting at is providing more time would do us no good.
Well, I think clearly the communications between me and the state are fractured a little bit. They're not optimal. It would give me the opportunity to speak with the Deputy Attorney General's office and address any concerns. I just don't think we're going to move the needle. They're going to move the needle on where I am, and I'm going to move the needle on where they are. I don't see it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just the tail end of that, I think I want to read this into the record from Kathleen Jennings. I just want to read this, the tail end of this, of the statement from the state. And it just talks about this letter is for the purpose of indicating our legal opinion that the City of Seaford Council was without legal authority to enact the ordinance. Under current state law, we believe that only the Delaware General Assembly has the authority to address the conduct targeted by the ordinance, and even then, that they may also do so consistent with the Constitution of the United States and the state of Delaware.
That's what it says.
Yep. And so can you talk a little bit about, once again, they're leaning towards saying, hey, we hear you, we've got something on the books, but we think this needs to come more at the General Assembly level and not at a city level.
I think that, I read that as a policy position, as that it would be better if the state could enact a law on this issue that would apply to all of the municipalities. And I'm not sure I disagree with that. If the General Assembly enacted a law that said exactly what this ordinance says, that would be great. If the General Assembly enacted a law that said no municipality can enact an ordinance like this, that's it. We can only do this because they haven't done that. So I would agree with the Attorney General. It would be helpful if, and we would have avoided all of this if the state had a law on this.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Before I suggest we make a motion, I do want to say how grateful I am to Mr. Griffith for his work on this, for the city leadership and all the employees of the city. I know this has put a lot of stress when you take on something like this. But I also want to say that the easiest thing to do as someone who runs for a small town office like this, where you don't get paid, you're really doing this as a volunteerism to serve your community. The easy thing to do on these things is nothing. And just ride it out and participate in parades and go to a couple dinners and kiss babies. But this was an opportunity that came up that I thought was the right thing to bring forward for this council to discuss. And I'm grateful that I'm elected to a city council that is willing to take things on like this. And most towns don't have that. And I'm truly, truly grateful. Grateful for both those who support and who don't. Everybody has been respectful, and I appreciate that, and appreciated reading all the emails, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails we received from both sides. So I do appreciate that. But I did want to say thank you to all of you, and I'm grateful for all of you. So with that, if there's no further questions, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to adopt the ordinance to be added to Chapter 8, Morals and Conduct of the City Municipal Code, Article 9, an ordinance relative to abortion, to establish a process for the disposal of fetal remains from pregnant women seeking abortion without the City of Seaford, as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman McCoy. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a second from Councilman Holland. Are there any questions on the motion? Councilman Santos, thank you.
Do we still have to read our reasonings as we vote?
Yes, as you vote, I think it would be expected that you would state why. You don't need to make a speech, but just, a reasoning from your heart why you're voting the way you are. I think it's fair for the city council, it's fair for the public to understand that. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman McCoy?
Yes. I believe the fetal remains deserve identified handling. I believe this is the right thing to do. And I believe our community has vocalized that to us throughout this process.
Councilman Holland?
I vote yes. With due respect, human remains shall be properly and decently disposed of.
Thank you. Councilman Henderson?
I'm sorry, but I got to read this. It betrays my libertarian instincts to enact ordinances that cause division. However, this situation has forced a decision to secure the time-honored right of sepulchre for the remains of the unborn. We, as a society, do this even for the most heinous criminals whom we execute in our prisons. I vote yes.
Councilman Santos?
No, I think it's government overreach.
Okay. Councilman King?
I vote no as well. I think this decision should be made at a lot different level than us. I think this is going to create some really financial hardships for the taxpayers within the city, and based on that, I vote no.
Okay, so the motion passes 3-2. Thank you all for again, your input. And with that, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. That's okay. It's fine. It's a little chaotic right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, we're gonna
Finance Director.
go back to our regular scheduled, and we're gonna go to new business number 1, where we're gonna have the annual audit presentation. And Mrs. Merritt, are you teeing this up, or?
Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
I have Bill Seymour, our auditor here from SB and Company. He's here to present the city's annual financial report. So with that.
Thank you, June. Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Bill Seymour. I'm the audit engagement partner with SB and Company, and this represents our required communications at the conclusion of a financial statement with those charged in governance or yourself. We'll walk through our presentation. Please feel free to stop me with any questions that you may have. Starting on page 3 of the presentation is our scope of services. We were engaged to perform, and we did perform, an audit of the June 30, 2021 financial statements of the city. We provided assistance in the preparation of those financial statements. We plan on issuing an unmodified, or if you will, clean opinion on the financial statements. That's the best opinion that we are allowed to issue under generally accepted auditing standards. We noted no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses during the course of our audit. Effectively, what that means is if you were to remove us as the auditors from the process, we believe from the work that we performed that based upon the policies and procedures and actions of management, that management would be able to create an accurate set of financial statements. It's a very fancy way of saying that the information that was provided to you from the system during the course of the year, we believe was correct. We did not discover, nor were we made aware of any instances of fraud. I would say that our audit is not a fraud audit. That would be different in scope. However, we are required to, under standards, to look for fraud in what we test, ask questions about it, maintain a healthy skepticism, and bring to you any concerns. We have none to bring to you. And lastly, we received the full cooperation of management. I want to thank June for all of her help in getting us the information. I'm going to jump ahead to slide 6. Through our audit approach, we look at controls at 2 levels. One is the control environment following the COSO model of internal controls. That is the 5 interrelated components of the environment: risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring. And you can see on pages 6 and 7 that in all cases our assessment was effective. Further, we look at the evaluation of key processes and the underlying functions. And this is on slides 8 and 9. And what we do through testing is be able to determine whether or not those functions and processes were designed and operated effectively during the course of the year. And you can see in all cases our assessment was effective. Have we had issues, lots of journal entries, problems, areas of concerns, we would use terms like significant deficiency or material weakness or needs improvement. We have none of those items to bring to your attention. On slide 12 is a summary set of financial statements of net position. You can see overall the assets of the city increased by roughly about $3 million over the course of the year. Whereas liabilities increased roughly by about $1 million. And you can see the total net position for governmental activities increased roughly about $1 million. I have a slide next that will go through some of those changes. Business type activities were relatively flat for the year, and then as well as the liabilities were slightly down there. We had no issues or any items that we would have to bring to your attention during the course of auditing of any of these amounts. On slide 13 is the statement or schedule of changes in net position, or if you will, activities. And you can see revenue is up roughly about $600,000 from last year for governmental activities, and up roughly about $1 million for business-type activities. What's driving the predominant amount of those changes are really from grants that were received in excess of what was received in the prior year. And then you can see that's offset by a relatively flat year of expenses. So if you will, revenue's up, expenses are down. Net income does better for the year, which is what occurred during the course of the year there. Once again, no items that we need to bring to your attention there. On slide 14, just as a kind of pie chart of where the revenues come from for the city. You can see taxes provide roughly about 41%, whereas intergovernmental revenues, or if you will, grants, provide about 29% of taxes or of revenues, and then transfer taxes of about 11%. And then you can see the remaining portions that make up the smaller amounts. On slide 15 is a pie chart that goes through and shows kind of where does the money go. Police department taking 34%, capital outlay, or if you will, expenditures that are made for capital-related items, buildings, cars, etc., make up about 19%. Then Parks and Recs, or the Parks Department, is 15%. Administration 8%. You can see the other ones as well. On slide 16, there is a new accounting standard that most likely will have not a significant effect, but it will change the financial statements, where we will record as an asset or an intangible asset and a liability the present value of any operating leases that the city has entered into. The old accounting that we used to do is we would just disclose that as a note in the financial statements, but now what we'll be doing is kind of grossing up the financial statements to show that liability and that intangible right to use asset. And I'll summarize the rest of our presentation. It just goes through our specific required communications. This is our responsibility, our opportunity to talk to you about if there were problems in the audit, if we had areas that lacked authoritative guidance, if we had disagreements with management, if we felt management was shopping opinions, talking to another accountant saying, hey, why won't you accept it? These guys do. Or anything that was kind of a negative nature. I have nothing to report. The audit went really smooth. Once again, I want to thank June for all of her help getting us the information and getting through. And once again, we will be issuing a unmodified or clean opinion on the statements. I know I went kind of quick, but I'll take any questions that you may have.
Okay, any questions from council in regards to the audit? Councilman Henderson.
On slide 8, sir.
Slide 8.
Column D is not checked, and I looked down here, test of control. However, on slide 9, column D is checked.
Yes.
Can you help me understand
Sure.
why this test of control was not performed?
So what we do is where we do our primary testing, one form of testing would be a test of controls. The other form of testing is what we term substantive testing, where we go and we actually validate the full amount that would be in there. So if you look at, like for instance, cash, we do look at controls, but instead of doing a controls test, what we do is we can test to ensure that the cash balance that's in the financial statements is fully substantiated. So we're able to see all of the bank reconciliations, confirmations, et cetera. So that's why we, for that one, we checked E. Whereas if you look at your expenditures or your payroll, what we do is we primarily do a test of controls where we're looking at a series of transactions that took place over the course of the year, a statistically valid sample that we're able to project to the population to determine whether or not the balance was reasonably stated.
Thank you for that concise explanation.
Other questions from council? Okay, there's no motion on this, so we thank you so much for the work you did. June, thank you too.
Thank you, June.
Really, it's good to have a good
Thank you.
financial house.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour.
Have a great day. Thank you.
too.
If
Happy
the
holidays.
audience
Thank
keep
you.
it down, please. All right, next we have the tax credits for KRM.
Okay, so council has in their package a resolution, and it is resolution number 2021-03, and it is a City of Seaford resolution to provide tax credits to KRM Development Corporation. And to summarize this resolution, council will recall that when we entered into the agreement of sale with KRM for the Western Sussex Business Campus, we agreed to provide them some tax credits. And you'll see that they are outlined there in the bottom third of this resolution. And I'll just read them into the record. It is exactly the same. It is a cut and paste from the agreement of sale. The reason why we're doing this in a resolution, the attorneys, excuse me, the attorneys are concerned that when the agreement of sale is consummated and they purchase the land, that does not survive closing. So they would like assurances that this will be granted going forward. So it states for the period of time beginning on the initial assessment date and ending on the second anniversary thereof, a total of 2 years, of 50% of the eligible assessment of purchasers' improvements on the property will be a tax credit. It goes on to state for the period of time beginning on the second anniversary of the initial assessment date and ending on the fifth anniversary thereof, a total of 3 years, 25% of the eligible assessment of the purchaser's improvements on the property. So it goes on to state at the end of 5 years, they will pay their full tax burden on the assessment, but this gives them an opportunity to start to develop the process, or develop the property, I apologize, and control some of their capital outlays. And council did agree to this as part of the agreement of sale. The Director of Economic Development, Ms. Newcomer, is here, who was point on the negotiation of that agreement. Certainly, she or I are available to answer any questions that council might have.
Okay, are there any questions in regards to the tax credits for KRM? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to approve the resolution number 2021-03 to provide tax credits to KRM Development Corporation for properties in the Western Sussex Business Campus, Sussex County Tax Map number 331-5.00-4.29, 331-5.00-4.30, 331-5.00-4.32, and 331-5.00-4.28 to be purchased by them as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Santos. Is there a second?
Councilman King, I'll second that motion.
Again, are there any questions on the motion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
And Councilman King?
Aye.
All right, thank you. It's unanimous. Thanks so much. All right, next we have a consideration request from Sean Stewart on the demolition.
Sean Stewart, Century 21 Home Team Realty. All right, cool. I'd just like to thank the mayor, council, city management for hearing me out this evening. This is in reference to the demolition proposal for 229 North Front Street. I guess everybody that was supporting me didn't get the memo, so it's just me here tonight, not a group of people. So prior to this property being vacated, I had been talking with the owner of the property because they were having financial issues being able to maintain the property. And so I suggested, hey, look, let's try to sell it. I've worked with a lot of investors in and around the Seaford area. I've sold a lot of properties in the Seaford area that have improved the community. That is one of my passions, one of my missions is to leave this place better than when I found it. And in this particular case, I reached out to the city and told them, hey, look, we're going to allow this property to be condemned because that's the only way that we'd be able to sell the property and to be able to get somebody to purchase it, to be able to fix it up and not be an eyesore to the community again. And so that's what we proceeded to do. And I try to reach out to the town to let them know that that was our plans, and we were going to allow the condemnation ordinance to take effect and so that the property could be vacated. At that time, we already had a buyer in place and its investor. I represent both the buyer and the seller of the property. I'm also working directly with a servicing specialist at Wells Fargo. And just as of yesterday, she asked for 5 days to give a final review of everything that, that they have on file. They do have to order an appraisal because the investor's purchasing the property for less than what the current mortgage is on the property. The intent of the investor is to bring it back to a duplex, which it is currently zoned for, not a rooming house or anything of that sort. And their plans are to start on the exterior of the property first to get it secured, to get it looking nice, and so it's not an eyesore when you're riding down Front Street, and to eventually, be able to have a duplex on the property. If the property's demolished, that they're no longer interested in doing that, but they would really like to have the opportunity to be able to rehab that property and bring it back to life.
City Manager, is this already scheduled for demolition?
Yes, sir, Mayor. It is actually new business item number 4, bids and the demolitions. It is one of the subject properties that is up for demolition if council decides to proceed with that.
Okay. Questions from council? Councilman King?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sean, can we talk a little bit about the vision, timelines, what that looks like?
Yep.
For this property, and then I have some questions afterwards from Mr. Bailey.
Timeline of the property, probably we won't have the approval until towards the end of this month. Closing will be the end of next month, and we're asking for 90, like a 90-day postponement, so that you can see that after it's been purchased, the work that happens around it, that it is, that it's brought up to standard. It will not be complete in 90 days, but from the exterior, riding by, you'd be able to see a major improvement during that time frame.
And you said that the plan was converted into a duplex?
Into a duplex, which it actually has two. It's a duplex now, but it was being used as a rooming house, boarding house. Individual rooms were being rented out. It would be 2 individual families, no individual people.
Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Did you have questions for Mr. Bailey?
I did, yeah.
Mr. Bailey, would you come up and?
Thank you. Hey, good evening. Mike. Hey, Mike, so can you give us some history? I mean, I'm not trying to be offensive, but I remember like this property, it seemed like there was a lot of issues, a lot of trouble, a lot of, at this location. So can you talk a little bit about this property and maybe you can weigh in on your opinion?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of the issues predate me. We've been dealing with it for probably as long as I've been employed here. It's just been up to this point. She's been was able to keep it up just enough to keep us out of there. End of last December, beginning of January 2021, some events happened with the police, which we were able to get in at that point, do an inspection of the upstairs. We saw enough things that we requested an inspection of the entire property. That's where a lot of these photos are there, and there's more photos. So at that point, we condemned the whole property. And she came in, she got a permit to make some repairs, get some of the people out because it was an overcrowding, what we saw. She did not make any of those repairs. So in June, the utilities actually got disconnected. So at that point, we gave a notice to vacate for everyone to be out within 10 days. We got them out on June 28th, and we boarded it up. We've had to go back a couple different times to reboard it because people have been breaking in. And now we're at this point. We issued the demo order. We've got the bids out for it. We've had an asbestos inspection done. And it's on the bids for demolition.
So can you talk a little bit? I mean, do you feel that the property is salvageable?
Structurally, I think it's not the worst one I've seen, but it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be a full gut.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Have we in that area, has there been any success when we have demolished homes that they have redeveloped?
Not yet. There's one lot that just did sell to Habitat for Humanity where we tore a structure down. It's probably been 5 or 6 years ago. So that actually went to sheriff's sale, and Habitat did purchase that, and they have plans to construct one of their single-family homes on that lot.
Didn't Teen Challenge do a lot of work in that area?
North Street.
They're a block behind this on North Street, yeah.
Other questions from council? Councilman Henderson.
Question for Mr. Stewart. I see by the sign it was on the MLS.
Yes.
Do you have any idea when the house was built?
No. I don't think anybody does. Structurally, I've been, like what Mike says, I've been in a lot of bad houses in 18 years of selling real estate. And I mean, as far as the bones on the property, I mean, they're pretty good structurally. And I'm not a structural engineer, but.
So if Wells Fargo relents in 5 days, how long would it take you to close with your buyer?
My buyer will be able to close next month in January.
In January?
Yeah. And that's why I'm asking, I mean, I know that this has been an eyesore. And I think in my suggestions to the current owner of the property is what helped get that property vacated so it could be boarded up and you didn't have the people there. So in short, I used the system to help get the place vacated so that we could sell it and we could make improvements to the property.
Okay. May I make a suggestion?
Let me first.
I don't know that it would be a motion, but my suggestion would be is that we find some way to delay the demolition until the person that closes can present a plan for the rehabilitation of the property. To outright cancel a demolition on a pending sale doesn't really, I know it doesn't make your buyer feel good, but I would like to see a plan
Right.
for the rehabilitation of the property prior to saying, no, we're not going to demolish it.
Okay.
So I would be in favor of delaying it. Now, I understand that the next order of business is to accept the bid, and there's a bid out there, and the Macklin Company may or may not hold their price.
Yeah, if I might, Councilman, Mike's going to help me, Mr. Bailey's going to help me a little bit here. I believe our bid requires the contractor to hold the price for 30 days. Is that correct, Mr. Bailey? So we have a short period of time. I don't think we have, it's 60 in this case. So we have that time in the contract documents. Second, we can also work with John Macklin and Son. They do demolitions for us routinely. Depending upon their schedule, we may be able to work with them somewhat, but beyond the 60 days, contractually, we could not.
Are there other, well, Mr. Mayor, if I could, are there other demolitions in the pipeline that are coming up to bid or coming up for council approval in the next month or so?
I mean, I've got some smaller projects that may not even need to go to bid, I'm not sure, but.
Well, what I'm getting at, would we be able to utilize Macklin in the interim if you don't have something that's bid worthy or needs bidding during the delay?
Mr. Bailey and I would have to talk about that. I don't want to violate any rule. I understand where you're going.
I don't want grind sausage
At the table, yes,
at the table, but I want to figure out a way to work with your buyer.
Right.
You have a pending sale.
Right.
We have done this with properties with a property in that neighborhood that's under permit, been longer than what's supposed to be, but there's progress being made. And there's a historic property on High Street that's been under construction for over 5 years that we have permitted, and we delayed demolition. So my initial question was, do you know when it was built?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a historic home, that makes it easier for me.
Right. Right.
If it was built in the era that the Allen House was built, that makes it very simple for me
Okay.
to say I would be in favor of delaying demolition because this home may have historic value in a neighborhood that needs historic things.
Right.
So if it comes to the table, I would be willing to make an alternate motion.
So
Are there any other questions, Councilman King?
Yeah, the piggyback, if I understood you correctly, the only concern that I have with Councilman Henderson's recommendation or request is the buyer has no interest if the house has to be demoed, correct?
Correct.
So if we extend this process and we're telling someone to buy the property, right? And then we come back 30 days from now, or 60 days, or 90 days, and we make a decision, hey, we need to demo this property, that's the worst thing that I would want to do to any buyer.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that scares me, to have somebody purchase the property, present a plan, and then ultimately we can demo the property.
Right.
I wouldn't want anybody to invest that type of money with that risk.
Right.
So that worries me. And the second thing, as Mr. Henderson alluded to, and don't get me wrong, I mean, every situation's different, but we've extended some things and timelines, and that they haven't completed them. They haven't reacted. It hasn't come to fruition to the way that they promised.
Mm-hmm. For this property here?
No, just since I've been on council, we've extended some things, and some things we're still waiting. So, and things happen, I get that, but this particular location, this particular house, the history and the activity, to be honest with me, I don't have a good taste in my mouth based around this property. But that's me. So
I'd like to, and to piggyback off of that, I'd like to remind the city council that, you know, downtown Seaford wasn't an attractive place to invest in at one point in time either.
Not long ago.
Yeah, not very long ago. And this, you know, this street has, you know, does have some downtown development opportunities in it. If it was converted to anything else, I think it would probably have to have, if it was torn down in this location, it would have to have first floor commercial.
It is a commercial lot though, correct?
It is a commercial, but if it was torn down, it would have to, whatever got built there would have to have first floor commercial, and then second story could be residential.
Exactly.
In being in real estate, getting somebody to invest in that location right now and do that same thing, I think it's going to be very difficult. And so that's why I'm proposing a delay, just in the proposed bid process.
So has the potential buyer did a site evaluation on this property? Have they gone in and called in an inspection?
Yes.
And they're pleased with their findings?
Yes.
Okay.
With the shell of the property.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
In addition, I would just say that there's a building almost across the street, Hatton Hall, that was torn down after a buyer bought it and did not commit to making improvements. So the city went ahead and tore that building down.
Right.
So there are examples on both sides where the owner didn't come through and the city went through with their plan. So I agree with you. I think the best use for this property is as that building sits, because if you tear it down, it's going to be vacant for a very, very, very long time. So, because you can't build a house there. If you tear it down, you can't build a house. It'll be a vacant lot until someone builds a storefront.
Correct.
With an apartment above it. It's part of the DDD, and it would be great to have one taker on Front Street to be a part of the DDD, because I don't think we have one taker yet. Okay, well, one of the few of the extra
Right.
30 acres that we added. So, and I think it incentivizes the buyer. It'll be either, or get off the pot, right? If he knows that this building, if he doesn't produce a plan acceptable for rehabilitation, that it'll be torn down, you may lose a sale. Or you may get a sale and he presents a plan to the city council. So if the sale is lost and he says, well, I'm really not serious about fixing this building up, then the city goes on with their plan. And it's unfortunate that you lost a sale, but if he's serious and presents a good plan, then the neighborhood gets improved.
Right. And the sales, I mean,
And you
sales
get
are
sale.
how I make a living, but what's important to me is the community. You know?
Yeah, this is going to butter your bread a little bit, but you're not hitting a home run on this one.
No,
He's getting both sides.
by no means, but you know, if we can make it look better than what it does,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
add value to the city, I think everybody wins.
All right,
So I
any other
appreciate your
questions or Councilman
comment.
Santos?
I would say, thank you for doing this, because I think this is a good service that you're doing. I remember when I was running and passing on flyers, I went into this house. I thought it was a duplex. Even though I'd seen a lot of people out there all the time, I still went over there. And once I went in there, I wanted to leave pretty quickly, because it was pretty, it wasn't what I expected. And I think that this is a good step in the right direction. So, thank you.
One more? What better way to improve the neighborhood by putting two families in there where it once was a crack house?
Well said. Any other questions or comments? I will make one suggestion, is we have been down this road a couple of times. It's not going well. It's been delayed. I would encourage council, if we do decide to delay, that we do put some strong timelines, as this community has tolerated this house and the problems that are going on there. I realize it looks bad. That bothers me. But crime and what's happening there is not acceptable. So, before I go to a squeaky voice like Councilman Holland, I will ask for a motion. Yes, sir.
Well, you want that to be part of the motion?
I just would encourage somebody, if that's what we want to, I just think we ought to give the code department. Yes, sir.
The building official, the city manager, 45-day time limit, acceptable, because that leaves you with several days left to bid to award. Yeah. You have to see for in those 15 days to approve.
Yeah, our next meeting is January the 11th, okay? So, just a suggestion from taking in the conversation today, and I'm asking Mr. Stewart to help me a little bit. I heard him say that within the next few days, he will have confirmation whether he can put together the financing.
5 days for Wells Fargo, who is the mortgagor on the property, to accept the offer.
That's a make or break in
So that's
5 days.
that's a milestone in between now and the next council meeting. The second thing, which I certainly agree with council moving in that direction, I think the prospective purchaser needs to get with our building official and submit a work plan that is acceptable to the building official, that lays out what will be improved, what the timelines are that a building permit would be issued upon. Our building department does that as a matter of course. I don't want to say daily, Mr. Bailey, but certainly you do that monthly for people. That doesn't expend any of the buyer's money. So if we have an acceptable work plan that's laid out and we have a commitment that the financing can go in the right direction by the 11th, then we can go ahead and, in good faith, if council decides to forego the demolition and move forward. We still will be within our window with the demolition contractor. Should they not check those boxes prior to the 11th, we can certainly proceed with our demolition if something falls through on your end, or the buyer gets in and says, this was more extensive than I thought. I didn't realize what the building official was going to require. You know, some of those things as I got into it. And maybe just one final question. The purchaser, the prospective purchaser, do they have experience in doing these types of buildings?
Yes.
Are we familiar with them?
Yes.
Okay. I get the sense you're not at liberty to share that person with us?
No.
Okay. Just, if they did not know Mike.
Right.
It's confidential information. Right
If they did not know Mike, I wanted to make sure we could connect them, because traditionally, people know
That
our
is
building
already in the
official and
works.
reach out to him.
Yep.
But, okay. Just a suggestion, if you want to make those 2 milestones, and then we can bring it back on January 11th. I think that puts us within our timeframes. I think we can work with our contractor to postpone, at least for that amount of
So,
time.
could I ask
Sure.
a question, city manager?
Yes, sir.
So let's say they buy it, they get it, we don't demolish it, issue permits, and everything stalls. And then we're not being facetious, but then we're in a situation where like some of our other properties, where we're talking 5 years down the road, or we're not where we needed to be or where we should be. And I mean, I'm not casting stones, I'm just being honest. We're just a situation where we have the opportunity in front of us to go in and demolish, to clean up the property, clean up the neighborhood. If we don't react now, they sell it, they come through, they say we're gonna do all these wonderful things, they buy it, we issue permits, they don't. Isn't it a lot harder at that point, after the property's purchased, than it is just to go and now tear the property down?
Yeah, Councilman, you're correct in your general statement. Okay, let's run it out in one scenario. They submit a work plan, we act in good faith, the building department issues a building permit for that, and they start to invest money in the project stalls. Pretty much when they start to invest a sizable sum of money, you know, the court's going to side with someone to let them finish. And they have the time of the building permit to run. Traditionally, our building permits are for 6 months. When we have a work plan, if someone says, no, that's only going to take me 4 months, we write the building permit around the work plan. So if they do nothing, we go back through this process in our normal demolitions. That makes it easier. When money gets invested, it does make it much more difficult. So your point is a good one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to postpone this business until January 11th meeting based on the pending sale.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Councilman McCoy seconds. Are there any questions on the motion?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes, sir.
Is there are we requiring any timelines or expectations? What are we expecting on the 11th?
I think by the 11th, you'll know whether the financing is ready to go and if a building permit's been pulled.
This motion will come, this business will come back.
Okay.
So we'll know those 2 things, which will be critical. And if Mr. Stewart needs to be here, we can ask him to be here to update us on where we are.
All right, thank you.
And if I might add, by that time, Mr. Stewart may have an agreement with the buyer to present a plan. If settlement hasn't occurred, if settlement has occurred, maybe he will be able to give us a plan. It's 4 weeks away.
But at that point, we'll make a decision.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions on the motion? If not, we will do a roll call vote. Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Mr. Mayor, he's my associate broker for Century 21 Realty.
Understood,
I'll
understood.
abstain.
So it passes 4 to an abstain. So thanks, Sean, for bringing this to us. We appreciate that.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, so we're going to skip number 4 and number 5.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I believe,
It's too proper.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I mean, if
Thank you.
council
Good
would
catch.
like, if council would like to go ahead and award the 406 North Street, we can certainly do that. if
Sorry.
council would like.
Yep. Do we need to present, Mike? Mr. Bailey?
I'm here.
Yeah, okay, I'm here. So, yeah, we did get 2 bids in, 406 North Street, and for 229 Front Street. So for just 406 North Street from Macklin, they were the low bidder on that individual property, as well as the total lump sum for, it was $11,800.
Just a question. When they offered these bids, are they based on getting both of these jobs or
No, the way
their individual?
the bid documents are written, we can pick and choose.
Okay,
yes.
just want to make sure. All right, are there any questions from council? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make the motion to accept the bid for John Macklin and Son Incorporated for the demolition of 406 North Street at a total of $11,800 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Holland. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Councilman McCoy seconds. Are there any questions on the motion? Do a roll call vote. Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman McCoy?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
aye.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Appreciate it. Now we're skipping number 5, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and we're down to reminder of meetings?
We are, sir.
How about that?
Okay, city offices and utility divisions will be closed for the Christmas holiday, Thursday, December 23rd, and Friday, December 24th. If I don't see council again, please have a safe and happy holiday season. And the city offices and utility divisions will also be closed for the New Year holiday, Friday, December 31st, 2021. And then I'd just like to, as we traditionally do, we start to announce our municipal election. It'll be held April 16th, 2022. The mayor will be up for a 2-year term, and 1 council member will be up for a 3-year term. And I would like to announce that Councilman McCoy has filed for re-election for his seat. This is an interesting year in that I'll note 2 things. We are now using the state database for voter registration, and it also falls on a holiday. So absentee ballots, all those kinds of things, it'll just be a little different. It's just something to pay attention to as we move closer to that. That's all I have, sir.
Okay, we'll start off with committee reports with Councilman Santos with administration and IT.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report has been submitted in its entirety. The city met with DEMEC, the board meeting. They attended the co-department meeting. They, in the IT report, they cabled new storage at the police station and started labeling new lines. They configured a new PC, resolved issues with the Dell order for processing, and they've been meeting with vendors. They are working on getting the command vehicle ready for partial test run. Well, they did that for the parade. And for the administration report, they finalized the audit. They are reviewing the city clerk job description and preparing for internal advertisement. They are preparing funding reimbursement requests for various projects. They are processing delinquent accounts for disconnects and generated bills for November consumption, and all other business is routine.
Okay, thank you very much. Next we'll have police fire, Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Got a report from Chief Wilson. Under fire calls, there's 877 to date. Calls for the month so far, there's a typographical error. I've left out the numbers, but there are an average of 2.5 calls per day for the year for total. Under EMS calls, there's 3,668 to date for an average of 10.5 calls per day for 2021. For a total of 4,545 for the year for an average of 13.0 calls per day. All apparatus are currently in service. The full-time employment flyer is out. We had a resignation, a recent resignation, and there's been 2 packets turned in as of Friday. Under training, they had a successful training on November 27th where they did the instructional live fire training at Atlanta Road. There were 35 members present. This was a successful meeting or a successful lesson, and the fire didn't get away from them. And the building is scheduled for demolition sometime in early January.
They were going to do a membership kind of drive that day. Were they able to gather any new members? Do you know?
I don't have the answer to that, but I will inquire and let you know. The department had elections, and their results are Chief Jackson Wilson is elected to a new term. Deputy Chief position is still open, and Matt Reed holds that until filled. First Assistant Chief is Ben Obeer. Second Assistant Chief is open. Third Assistant Chief is open. Patrick Gaskin is retained as president. The Vice President's seat is open, and Derek Adams holds that until it's filled. Secretary is Ken Tull, and the treasurer is still Jim Mitchell. As of yesterday, we were notified that there were winners from the county in the fire prevention essays. However, they were not listed. We don't know their names yet. The chief committed to getting that information to me as soon as it was available. We have an update on Ken Tull and how he's recovering from his injuries. Ken is resting comfortably at PAM Rehabilitation in Dover with ongoing rehab work that makes him tired throughout the day. He has started to walk with assistance, so please keep him in your thoughts and your prayers. You'll see some other news and events where the department's been active, and don't forget that on Friday night, Santa will be riding through the community on the tower truck, and that will start at 6 p.m. and the route is posted on the fire department Facebook page. So, Chief asked me to convey to Mayor and Council and staff to have a Merry Christmas and a safe holiday, and he hopes to be with us after the new year. Thank you. So, under Seaford Police Department, you'll see the chart of year-to-date crimes versus previous years. We have exceeded the 2020 numbers in total crimes in nearly all categories, and I expect by the end of the year that we will have exceeded in just about every category. It's unfortunate to say. There were 317 criminal complaints, and you'll see the distribution below there with an 85% clearance rate. You'll see a crime view chart that if you enlarge it on your screen, it will make it a little bit more sensible. But under additional crime data, there were 37 total complaints, and you'll see those distributed below. I'm sorry, there were 37 complaints consisting of assault, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, and stalking. So there's a 51% clearance rate on that, which is generally consistent with the previous period, which is pretty good. Under drug complaints, you'll see the distribution Of those, there's 15 total crimes, 12 adults, and 3 prosecution decline, 1 overdose. And I don't know the disposition of the overdose, whether they were able to recover this person or not. Under traffic citations, there were 424 traffic contacts with 124 citations and 34 warnings. 3 DUIs, 2 alcohol and 1 drug related. 39 crashes, 17 reportable or non-reportable, and 22 reportable, with 7 hit and runs. 2 pedestrian crashes. You'll see a distribution here of significant events where I believe the chief said that the Valero shortstop has been robbed 3 times in 1 month. And there's been some action that's been taken to try to figure out why that's happening and identifying a suspect. So you can see under administration, the department maintains a busy schedule. The as an update, on December 9th, 2022, the Delaware Criminal Justice Council approved the department's application for the Federal Comprehensive Opioid Abuse Site-Based Program, AR funds. The award was in the amount of $321,000 to develop and oversee a drug diversion program for the city of Seaford and the town of Laurel police departments. The funding for this program will include components to address pre-arrest diversion, substance abuse, and drug abuse. And since there's 2 towns involved, Seaford will take the lead on the development and implementation of this program. And in my discussions with the chief, this the implementation process may begin as early as sometime in January, within the next month. So I don't have anything else to add except we'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and have a safe holiday.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Code, Parks and Rec. Councilman Holland.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will start with Kate. Rental license renewals have been sent out. Amazon parking lots have been paved. Shelving and racks are being installed inside the building, and they are in the process of hiring. Material for a 7-Eleven building is being delivered, and the new Dollar Tree at the Nylon Capital Center is under construction. And all other work is routine. The code department would like to wish everybody a blessed and safe holiday. And we'll switch to Parks and Recs. Parks and Recs hosted an annual caroling in the park event on 11/30, which was well attended, I thought. And they assisted the Downtown Seaford Association with the Christmas Parade. And they have removed and filled in mile markers around Hooper's Landing. And they have a total of 140 children registered for the youth basketball and 10 registered for Little Wrestling Clinic. And they are beginning creating practice availability and schedules for coaches. And they met with Salisbury Kiwanis Club member for upcoming special events at the Jay's Nest on 12/28. And the Parks and Recs Department, I'd like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas also.
Very
And
nice.
that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next, we have Electric. Councilman McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hit a few bullet points real quick. Since the last report, the crew, they put up the snowflakes on High Street and turned on the Christmas lights. They've energized the transformer at the Amazon project. We did have 2 outages on the same day on the 24th of November. The outages were at 120 East Spruce Street and 512 Arbutus. They are both around 30 to 45 minutes in duration, both caused by squirrels, so watch out. Had a meeting on the road closure to help for the Christmas parade. In regards to our director, he had a standardized director's meeting, staff meeting, and was acting city manager from November 25th through the 5th. He also had a progress meeting on the WSBC project. Did Greg Brooks' 30-day evaluation for his new position, and did Nick Moore's skills assessments for lineman school. Over the course of the upcoming weeks, going to plan on working on the second service at Allen Street, continue working at Wawa to run the loop feed to the front pole line, and run the service for the Tesla charging station. Mr. Mayor, that's a few bullet points, but the report's been submitted in its entirety, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Thank you. Finally, we have Public Works and Wastewater, Councilman King.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report has been submitted in its entirety. I'm just going to hit a couple highlights. The team has been working extremely hard around leaves, the leaf machine's out, the sweeping leaves, picking up a lot of limbs. They've been doing some maintenance, and I hope this isn't foreshadowing to what's to come. They've been working on the salt spreader, and they've performed maintenance on all plows. So hopefully the weather will stay like it has been over the last couple of days, and we won't need them at all. Concrete work for street paving bids have been completed. They've repaired a collapsed sewer lateral on Market Street. They helped set up the Christmas parade and helped tear that down. That's very much appreciated. And they're doing all these things, and there's still one person down. I'm going to jump over to the wastewater treatment facility. All's going well. Plant performance remains good. They're selling the last of the compost, so come get it while you can. Some of the activities coming up over the next 2 weeks, they're going to install 2 remaining taps at Bel Air townhouses. They're going to repair cleanouts on the smoke testing list, and they continue all routine tasks. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report, and I would also like to wish everyone a happy and Merry Christmas.
Again, I want to thank all of you. I know it's been a busy, busy year. I keep saying that every year, but this year was especially busy, and thank all of you for the work you do. I know these are tough jobs when you have a full-time job, and to do this, I know I fibbed to some of you saying it was just a little bit of work here and there, but it's pretty much,
Say that part again, sir.
it's just a little bit of work, comes and goes, right? But again, had a great, city did a great job on the Christmas party. It was a lot of fun, and appreciate all that you all do. So with that, I say Merry Christmas to you, and we'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman Holland, I second that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you.
June, you want these back?